I'm Big Don Luka, smoke you like my hookah. Pump fake right, then I step back in illusion. That's a boss move maneuver, billionaire entrepreneur. Mark Cuban on the viewer, put you rookies on a skewer. I stay shitting on you boys like I came up from the sewer. Used to have a lot of dollars, now I got a lot fewer. What you saying to me? I hope you save it for me. I'm about to kill the game, and I put it in my testimony.
Hi, welcome to the Mainstream Mavs podcast. This is your host, Will. I am joined right here by my co-host, Jaren.
What is up, guys?
Following a historical night, for those listening on YouTube, we got the Luka jerseys on right now. I mean, the absolute quintessential MVP performance that you could ever ask for. 60 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, the game-tying shot to force overtime off of a intentional missed free throw in which he got his own rebound and was able to throw up a shot in midair and make it with about 1.2 seconds left. I mean, the most fun game of the year. Me and Jaren were lucky enough to attend. We're actually blessed as a Christmas gift. And I mean, it just doesn't get any better than this. This is why we do this. This is why we interact with you guys, because of moments like this. This was probably the coolest thing I've ever been a part of as a Mavs fan, to be able to see live. It was easily the best individual performance I've ever seen in any sporting event. It was so cool to be able to witness it live. I mean, just down the stretch where you just saw this guy expelling every last bit of energy, emptying the absolute tank to carry this team over the hump when it looked grim, when the Mavericks were down by 9 points with 27 seconds left. And Luka Doncic seemingly said, screw that. I'm going to take control of this. We're winning the fucking game, for lack of a better term. And he went ahead and did that. There's some other things to get into this game, but mainly the primary focus, of course, is going to be on Luka Doncic's insane 60-point triple-double and fourth quarter and overtime performance. And, before we get to the ad break and everything, I just want to go ahead and fast forward to the sequence, of course, at the end of the fourth quarter that led to all this before we talk about Luka Doncic's game holistically. And we look at, his whole performance over the course of the game. And, we go more in depth into overtime. I just want to get into, what's oh, Jesus. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a little bit excited right now.
We just got back.
Yeah. Okay. Let's, just segue directly to that fourth quarter, Jaren, where the Mavericks were seemingly dead in the water. Me and you had even penciled this in as we were sitting up in the nosebleeds. We're like, okay, this is another loss. This is snapping a 3-game streak. Deservingly so, might I add. The Mavericks did not deserve to win this game.
No, not at all.
No, 77, El Mavrio, Donovich, whatever you want to call him. He came in, put his foot in the ground and said, F that. We're going to take this game.
He was about the only guy in the arena, I think, that wanted to win that game. I mean, I don't know what there's to say. Incredible. For sure, single-handedly the best sporting event I have ever been to. I mean, I just still don't have words.
We haven't
for
even
what I saw.
mentioned the reason that we had went to this game in the first place, because it was the Jalen Brunson revenge game. And, it was announced early in the day on the Knicks injury report that he was going to be a game time decision. Me and Jaren had both basically came to the summation, or the conclusion rather, my bad, that Jalen Brunson, this is a competitor. He has a little bit of hip soreness. If he's listed as questionable, this is a guy who's going to go out there and play. And that didn't happen. And that's not me trying to discount the severity of his injury. It could be worse than we thought and what have you. So I'm not calling him a quitter or anything like that, but we were just surprised that he wasn't playing. And, we were not bummed out. We were still very much excited to go to the game, of course. But, we were like, of course, our expectations were definitely dwindled in terms of how, magnificent a display of a game we were going to get. Obviously the Mavericks are extremely injury riddled right now. We were up in the nosebleeds. We were predicting the trends that happened throughout the game. Just when the Mavericks rolled up the starting lineup of Luka, Spencer, Tim, Christian Wood, and Dwight Powell that Jason Kidd only went to because they bared so much positive aggression in that second half of the Lakers game. He decided that it would be really smart to opt to go with Dwight Powell and Christian Wood, which, to say the least, did not bode the best defensively. It had its moments where you could kind of see how that gelled offensively, but I mean, two guys who you have to involve in the pick and roll and are essentially rim runners, even though Christian Wood can stretch the floor, it just has a tendency to operate really clunky when you're not bearing any of the effects on the defensive end, of course, with both of those guys' lack of rim protection. Though Christian Wood did have a few good moments tonight, especially in that overtime period when he blocked a Blues of Miles McBride, or was it Quentin Grimes?
I think it was Quentin Grimes.
Quentin Grimes 3-point shot. He had a couple. I think he had a moment where
that was McBride.
Yeah. And then he had a moment where he stuffed either Derrick Rose or Quentin Grimes at the rim.
I think it was Quentin Grimes at the rim.
Yeah. He was kind of getting ate alive by Mitchell Robinson, kind of per expected, one of the more dominant interior defensive and rebounding forces in our game. But, where he was able to supplement and, kind of come through as a help side defender and, really start to furbish himself on the glass a little more in that second half. He did as much as he could. This is not a guy who really has the size and the intangibles or the defensive pedigree to match up against like a Mitchell Robinson and, just hold his ground completely. He doesn't have that size. So that's not really something that we were like asking from him or anything. So it's not, that came more down to personnel and the Mavericks injuries and what have you. But, he's definitely a guy that really stepped up in this game. And, I mean, there's a lot of, other things to get into barring Luka, but, he's going to be the centripetal focus of this. Because, I mean, what he did tonight was otherworldly. It showed how incomprehensibly good he is. I mean, just the way that he operates so nonchalantly in terms of his physicality, yet he operates so meticulously mentally. It's not something that I think we've ever seen in the NBA before. And I tweeted that as well. So, like I was saying, obviously quite the grandiose introduction per se, but it deserves it.
Deserving,
to say the very least. And we're going to talk more about him after, you kind of hash out the Mavericks end of fourth quarter stretch and overtime stretch where they had this insane comeback and, obviously led by number 77, down by 9 with 27 seconds left. How did the Mavericks completely fleece this when they were dead in the water, just not in any dimension of Doctor Strange's universe, not in any of the multiverses where the Mavericks supposed to win this game, but won, and they somehow pulled through? How did it happen, Jaren?
Yeah, so I can say this pretty safely. I think with around 50 seconds left, we were probably sitting in our seats, and we were, a little PO'd to say the least. Yes. I know I was. But yeah, let's, I guess, talk this over through the play-by-play. Yeah, we were grieving. Yeah. Our classic 1-1 against the Knicks for the season. But yeah, let's hash this over through the play-by-play. I'm just going to go pretty much from whenever Miles McBride was fouled by Christian Wood with 34 seconds left. He goes 2 for 2 at the free throw line. And then Christian Wood with 26 seconds left. Or I guess, it was like a jump ball with 21 seconds left. Between Luka and Grimes. Luka somehow gets the ball back. And me and you just found this out that jump balls, if you somehow win the ball, or like, how do we want to word this?
If you get into a jump ball with another player, say, so Luka got into a jump ball with
Quentin Grimes. He tangled up. Quentin Grimes had the ball.
Yes,
Luka
this is right off the inbounds pass. Mm-hmm. And once you get into a jump ball, if you win the jump ball, that ends up becoming a steal for you and subsequently a turnover for the player that lost it if it goes the other way. And I had no clue that the statistics ever ironed out like that. Some of you guys listening may be calling us dumb or stupid for not knowing that. I never knew that, so I apologize. But I thought that was a cool little thing. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so Luka, anyways, he got that steal, basically winning the jump ball between him and Quentin Grimes. Tim Hardaway, he misses his 3-point shot. And Luka Doncic rebounds, which would become, I want to say his 17th rebound or something like that. And he basically has a putback and one, which cuts the lead to 106. Oh wait, no, I missed. I think I missed a shot here. Okay, no, Christian Wood made a shot in between there. He made a 3-point shot to cut it to 6. And then that Luka Doncic thing happened. And yeah, he gets a putback and 1 to cut for his, total.
Off the Christian Wood miss. He
got a rebound
mid-air,
puts it in
from the left block, and he gets fouled by
Emmanuel quickly,
like midair, and he makes it.
And that was his 50th point whenever he made the free throw.
Yes.
So New York subsequently calls a timeout.
The Mavericks are only down by 3 at this point.
Yeah, they're only down
109.
Yeah, because Luka made his free throw, of course. Yeah. So it's 112-109 at this point. New York calls a timeout to advance the ball because they pretty much know they're going to get fouled in this scenario. The ball is given to Miles McBride in the inbounds, and Luka Doncic fouls him. That would become his 5th personal foul. And that's, I think, whenever we were pretty much like, oh, okay, well, maybe this game's over. Anyways, Miles McBride goes 1 of 2 from the line, which made the lead 113-109. Dallas calls their timeout, their final timeout, and they sub in Reggie Bullock and sub out Christian Wood in that scenario, where Spencer Dinwiddie pretty much just goes down the floor
and comes off a down screen. He's wide open. He pulls up for 3 off of a Luka
in 2 seconds. Mind you,
off of a Luka inbound pass and drains it.
Yeah, and just drains a pull up 3. So New York calls their final timeout to advance the ball because, again, they know they're about to get fouled. And they make some subs. We make some subs with Frank Ntilikina in the game. Spencer takes his 3rd personal foul and fouls Miles McBride again, where Miles McBride again goes 1 of 2 from the free throw line to make the lead 114-112. And pretty much the Mavericks just had a heave it moment with 7 seconds left. And I didn't realize this. I thought New York had a foul to give, but they did not in that scenario. So the ball is given with 7.7 seconds left. It's given to Luka, where he pretty much drives all the way to the other side of the floor.
And they take the foul very timely at the top of the 3-point line.
Quentin Grimes fouls Luka Doncic at the top of the key, and Luka goes 2 for 2 at the free throw line he goes 1 of 2 for the free throw line. Sorry. Yeah, and he on purposely misses the second.
Well, we saw JaVale sub in, and we were like,
okay, wait,
all game.
Yeah. And so we pretty much knew what was going to happen. We knew he was going to go in for a tip. Yeah. And that's, JaVale made that happen. I know Luka ended up getting his rebound.
Luka did the bulk of the heavy lifting here, but JaVale got the little tip off of the Luka miss. Luka is able to track his own rebound, and one of the most.
This was like playoffs. Whenever was it Russell West? No, Steven Adams had to miss a free throw against the Rockets or something like that.
Just one of the most magnificent displays of concentration.
In midair
in an end of game scenario I've ever seen. Yeah, and to see it live was quite literally probably the coolest moment I've seen at a sporting events. Admittedly, I've
never seen a buzzer beater,
but I haven't seen anything like too cool. But JaVale tips it to him, and he just basically grabs the ball to thin air perfectly and gets the shot up, releases it basically at as he's descending. His foot is literally like a centimeter away from touching the ground, and this being called a travel, and he releases it, and it kind of rattles in and ties the game up.
Yeah, and with 1 second left, Emmanuel quickly is pretty much forced to heave the ball full court. And it was clinked off the backboard.
He did get the backboard.
I saw it. Yeah, we had like a perfect angle at it, and it did look like
we were kind of like we were very much tentatively paying attention as we were going absolutely berserks at that moment. But I saw the ball in the midair, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to look at this.
Yeah,
I saw it hit the backboard. I was like, oh, okay, bullet dodged.
Yeah. So, anyways, Luka Doncic had he finished 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists.
Okay, so they did a credit.
It was 21. Yeah, it was 21 rebounds. And amazing. Now, out of all the crazy Wilt Chamberlain stats there is out there, somehow Wilt Chamberlain did not do this, and Luka Doncic becomes the first 60-20-10 in NBA history, and
the most points in Mavericks franchise history.
Yeah, there's so many historic stats that go along with this game.
Tim McMahon tweeted the Mavericks were NBA teams were 13,884, something insane, when trailing by 9 with however many 30 seconds left
with the last 20 seasons or something.
Luka, I think the second player ever to get a 60-point triple-double. I believe the only other one was Harden
in 2018.
Yeah. This is just bonkers stuff. I mean, there's no other way to put it. This was insane. And we're really excited to get into the rest of the podcast with you. We'll go over overtime. We'll go over, the whole summation of Luka's performance tonight, how he was getting all these points, how he was attacking the glass, involving his teammates. And then, towards the end of the pod, we'll actually start to maybe cycle in a few other Mavericks performance and
lackluster performances
and just the general flow of the game, of course, and how the Knicks played. This is going to be definitely a more differently structured podcast than you guys are used to in terms of our post-game podcast, because normally we don't even shed too much of a light on Luka because it's like, oh, Luka's Luka. And I think that's a lot of Mavericks podcasts. Like, he's always this stagnant figure and we almost take him for granted at times.
Yeah,
we don't
most times.
Yeah, because we just, when he's so consistently good as he is, it's like, how much more is there to say, right? But he deserves every bit of praise that we can give him, and that much is shown on a night like tonight. But before we get into all of that, obviously this does not apply for you guys on YouTube, but here's an ad from our sponsor, Anchor. All right, Jaren, so getting into it, we already covered the fourth quarter, of course, in the introduction, where we talked about the insane comeback the Mavericks made down 9 with, less than 30 seconds left. And, Luka's midair, basically 2 midair, one of which was an and one, and one of which ended up, being the offensive rebound where he shot at midair and ended up making the, shot to tie the game at the end of regulation. Of course, just 2 incredibly spectacular midair plays. We got into all that. Let's go ahead and focus on overtime at this point. So, the Mavericks are riding high on this insane momentum that they had just built off of, this plethora of, Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie plays down the stretch to be able to tie the game. They ended up starting with JaVale McGee at the start of overtime.
Yeah.
Because he had played at the very tail end, but they ended up subbing in Dwight Powell, I think, with about 3-ish minutes left. They're actually at a kind of a tough time being able to score both sides of the ball. We saw the Knicks they were having a tough time getting anything going. And I believe the Mavericks didn't have any actual field goals till about 1 minute and 9 seconds left when Luka hit a turnaround fadeaway over Julius Randle. So how did overtime shape up for the Mavericks, and how were they able to, remediate some of the pressure that the Knicks were putting on them? Because I thought defense was something that really came into effect for the Mavericks in overtime, something that throughout the course of this game, they really did not do a good job of.
Yeah, I know the Mavericks, it was sort of like this back and forth free throw battle at one point early on in overtime. I want to say it was like 116 to 115 for like a solid 2 minutes. And finally, Mitchell Robinson, I think it was, he goes 1 of 2 at the line to tie up the ball game. And then Dallas makes, they outscore the Knicks 120 to 116 in free throws. And pretty much from there, that's whenever the field goal started dropping. But for the Mavericks alone, defense came in handy, which is like the only 5 minutes of defense throughout this game, I feel like.
Yeah, I know 100%, because some of those Mavericks lineups that were out there throughout that first and second half, for that matter, were completely abysmal. I mean, just the rotations, first off, were completely out of sort, and the point of attack defense was just non-existent at times. Tim Hardaway Jr., Spencer Dinwiddie, even Luka at times. He did have some reconciliation in terms of his defensive effort in the fourth quarter and overtime, where you could tell he was, and that's not an indictment upon him. We obviously know he pours everything into what he has to do offensively and plays a ton of minutes, so you can't expect him to have to, of course, try that hard on that end all the time. But he was getting blown by. I mean, Christian Wood got blown by a few times. Dwight Powell was getting blown by badly, was getting lost on all his rotations. And, guys were preemptively jumping when they would rotate, like before guys would even get the ball in their hands. Sometimes guys were having really late double teams to the point where it would just create this domino effect of ball movement for the Knicks around the perimeter, to where, they could either get a wide open 3 or get the ball inside off dribble penetration off of, preemptive closeouts, and then find Mitchell Robinson the dunker spot. So there was just, it just seemed really like unsynchronized, and the Mavericks looked all out of sorts. The personnel wasn't really equipped from the Mavericks side, just with the amount of injuries they have. Of course, having basically their best 3 defenders out. I mean, even Reggie Bullock didn't really have that good of a defensive game. He was getting blown by a lot, and he was seemingly the Mavericks' only wing defender off the bench. So for the Mavericks to really step it up, for Christian Wood to get that block on that corner 3 that Miles McBride took in overtime, to really anchor down. And it seemed like the Mavericks, just by committee, really stepped it up in terms of their defense at the rim in that overtime period, because there were a lot of times where, Quentin Grimes or Julius Randle were getting to the paint, but the Mavericks were able to fortify that back end, even if they didn't necessarily have, rim protectors or the bigs to do so, which I thought was really, while that's not sustainable, I thought it was really emblematic in terms of the fight of this team. You saw these guys fighting for Luka right there at the end, which was really heartening to see. So, I thought that was a big, compelling narrative from overtime, as well as what Luka was able to do down the stretch. Did you want to detail how Luka was kind of able to score in overtime? Because I believe he scored 7 more points in overtime.
Yeah, he had he finished regulation 53 points, and finished the game, of course, with 60. I want to say majority. He was
essentially, how many points did the Mavericks score in overtime?
They scored 11 points in overtime.
He scored 7 out of the 11 points. I think. My memory is leaving me here. I think
I want to say Christian Wood may have made a 2-pointer, and then Spencer had a drive.
Christian Wood made 2 free throws. Remember, he got clobbered.
Oh, 2 free throws. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, Spencer. And then I believe Spencer made 2 free throws. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think.
Yeah, I think there was only 2 field goals made.
Yeah, one of them was a Luka.
Yeah, Luka turnaround, and then I feel like Spencer had like a layup in transition or something.
Here, well, I'll look it up. But if you want to just detail how Luka was able to get to the, despite all, everything he had done up until this game, having 53 points, you'd think that he would basically be persecuted, but he just, time and time again, just kept going to the rim. It seemed as if his stamina bar wasn't running out. Like, you could tell how gassed he was. And he was applying every single little ounce of effort he had, but he still just kept going. So talk about that and how he was able to keep applying pressure on the rim in overtime.
No, yeah. I mean, Luka did an amazing job from pretty much fourth quarter through overtime, of just really applying as much pressure as he could at the rim. One thing that he would do was, of course, he'd get the smaller defender on him through a screen, and then before the Knicks would be forced to pretty much switch. So he'd get the smaller defender, and seemingly Luka just had to go down low, and that's whenever he'd pretty much get hacked. It kind of seemed like the Knicks were a little overzealous in overtime, and honestly, I didn't even really realize it, but both teams were in the bonus.
Insanely physical.
Yeah.
The Knicks, that was like, I mean, there were a lot of loose ball fouls. Robinson started kind of pulling and tugging, and you could tell like some of the things he was getting away with earlier on in the game. The refs just weren't budging because it was just more egregious in terms of how he was going after some of these rebounds. And that's not to say, I mean, he's an incredible player, of course, but we just saw the Knicks. You could tell that they kind of got caught with their pants down. And
they were in desperation.
They were in desperation. Yeah. And that's why they, were kind of so frantically going after everything. And it definitely helped the Mavericks free throw case, I thought, for sure.
Yeah, no, the free throw case for the Mavericks, I want to say throughout pretty much 99% of that game was pretty low. They were missing quite a bit of free throws. And, in overtime and late in that fourth quarter was pretty much whenever the Mavericks turned the tide. And that's whenever I want to say the free throw percentage was like 76% from the line for the game for the Mavericks.
Luka went 16 of 22.
Yeah.
And so when we get into more of the discussion of how Luka was able to score so much and, do the insane things he did in this game, we'll obviously talk about his aggression. But I thought that was really he did really good in terms of that tonight. Yeah,
it kind of seemed like as soon as, like you said, it seemed like guys, went out with, hey, Luka's doing this, so let's do it for him. And that's pretty much what overtime was about. And, through the free throw line, that's how the Mavericks were getting it done. Now, granted, most of it was Luka, but he was able to knock down a lot of his free throws. I think he may have missed one free throw through the whole entire overtime period. Maybe, I don't even know if he missed one. But yeah, that's how the Mavericks are really getting it done. I want to say this was honestly maybe the first game this season where the Mavericks knocked down their free throws as of late to win the game, or at least where free throws came in clutch for the Mavericks. But yeah, I mean, the Mavericks defensively just did an amazing job. I alluded to it earlier. You know, the Knicks were just sort of playing desperate. Miles McBride was I think he played like 40 minutes in this game. Emmanuel Quickley, he at one point had like 15 assists, and that was like midway through the fourth. He didn't finish with another assist the whole entire game. I mean, the Mavericks just did a really good job of either, because the big problem throughout the whole entire game was the Mavericks were just being too aggressive in the sense that, you know, a guy would get the ball at the top of the 3-point line. He didn't even have to pump fake, and the Mavs would be jumping. The Mavericks did a really good job of holding their water and actually playing defense for once and not playing overzealous, or what did you said it really well throughout the game. But yeah, you know, the Mavericks actually, like I said, played defense and held their water through the whole entire, pretty much the end of the fourth quarter and of course overtime.
Yeah, no, I'm having trouble, you know, trying to figure out what you were alluding to, what I was saying during the game. I may have to think about that one. But to your point, of course, the Mavericks did do a better job of just anchoring down, fortifying their team defense. This was not a lineup, a lineup of which, you know, the Mavericks were so depth struck in this game, where they essentially were playing their starters so heavily, you know, in tandem with really just Reggie Bullock, that has a lot of defensive versatility. I mean, every single guy in that starting lineup would, you know, by general NBA fans, not maybe my Mavericks fans, of course, because we know Luka and we know some of these guys are not just complete net negatives and albatrosses on the defensive end. But, you know, by the common NBA fan, a lot of the, you know, the 5 guys in the Mavericks starting lineups would probably be considered net negative defenders. And I mean, that's not an egregious statement or something outlandish to say. And for the Mavericks to still, when the going got tough, these guys recognized what Luka was doing, and they were able to fortify the back end and really clutch up when it mattered most, and, you know, apply defensive pressure. I mean, the Mavericks, I think, went to a zone one time in this game. So it's really indicative of these guys just, you know, entering another threshold in terms of their defensive intensity and effort, you know, something that may not be realistic, or something that, you know, is not going to be sustainable for a Spencer Dinwiddie, a Tim Hardaway Jr., a Christian Wood to be able to do it on a game-to-game basis. You know, especially if you just watch this game, you see how badly they got beat off the dribble at times during this game, right? But I'm sorry, guys, my voice is leaving me. We're screaming quite a bit. But we ended up seeing how, you know, when it really mattered, you know, we're like, okay, like 77 is doing this, you know, we can't just, you know, be pansies and get caught with our pants down. Like we got to step up. And, you know, while that may not be emblematic of these guys being like a long-term fit, or, you know, the idealistic rotational players of Luka, or, you know, making this roster, you know, like that didn't like prove that this roster is going to go far in the playoffs or anything like that. It did prove one thing, that these guys, at least in the, you know, this current rendition of this Mavericks team, knows what they have in Luka. They value it, and they're going to fight for him. And that much was, you know, largely impressive to me, especially in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, yeah, through overtime, I mean, that was just pure fight from the Mavericks, in which I think that they showed me, at least. I know they showed you, that, I mean, this team actually has some fight, because it seems like throughout multiple cases through this season, this team just seemingly gives up. And there's only one guy that doesn't, and that's Luka. Well, tonight it was a different case. You know, Luka, of course, didn't give up, but the guys around him finally pretty much buckled up their pants, and we're like, okay, like, let's do this thing. Let's win this game. And they did.
No, yeah, 100%. And it was quite the sight to behold. And needless to say, it was very good the Mavericks pulled this one out in overtime, because it would have been basically just complete and utter, you know, fluctuation of my aortic valves, and my blood would have been pumping at like unknown rates throughout the entire time. As it was, thank God I was able to settle after they were able to win. So I'm just happy that they came through in the end. There was nothing really wildly spectacular besides Luka hitting that 60-point marker in overtime. You know, he clutched up and made his free throws. I got to give it to him. There were a couple times where the MVP chance came in, and he missed the first one. But, you know, when the going got tough, he made the most important free throws, the ones to get him to 50 and the ones to get him to 60. So what are you going to say at that point, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, Let's go ahead and get into Luka's individual performance, something that we want to shed the light on the most in this podcast, of course. How was he able to score in this game? This Knicks defense, they obviously have Quentin Grimes as their main point of attack defender. You have Robinson, who, I think a lot of guys driving to the rim, perpetually are scared of trying to go up against him. Outside of that, though, they don't have a ton of defensive versatility in that starting lineup. RJ Barrett, he ended up getting out early in this game with a right index finger laceration after Luka tried poking the ball from behind on him, and he was bleeding really bad. So he was out of the game in the first quarter. He's about an average defender. Julius Randle's roughly an average defender, sometimes a below average defender.
Sometimes an above average defender.
Sometimes above average defender. That's very true. That's a very good descriptor of him. And then, they have some, interesting guys on like McBride and stuff off the bench, but, besides Quentin Grimes, they really don't have that, defensive anchor, right? And they weren't doing anything schematically. Tibbs is notorious as a great defensive coach, but they weren't doubling Luka. They were kind of deferring to him, trying to make the other guys beat him. And the strategy was working for them for a while. They were kind of just letting Luka score as much as he wanted. And Mavericks continually claimed 3-point shots, but Luka took it to another level to where they just didn't matter in this game, in the latter half of that fourth quarter, right? And that's something that, I don't think we've ever seen him really take it. We've seen greatness from Luka, but the level that he went to tonight, we'd never really seen. So I just want you to kind of detail how Luka was scoring, particularly, in that fourth quarter, second half, and, in the first half as well, obviously.
Yeah. So I think the main defender on that starting five for the Knicks, at least on Luka, was definitely Quentin Grimes. We saw him on Luka the most. The Mavericks, I will definitely say they did a really good job. And I know the Knicks did an amazing job of getting mismatches too, but the Mavericks did a really good job of, when it did matter, they got the needed switches on Luka. So Luka was basically able to take control of these mismatches, whether it be Julius Erving or not Julius Erving. Wow, that was a Randall. Whether it be Randall, Miles McBride, or even Emmanuel Quickly at times. Luka, of course, going to work down low on these sort of smaller defenders, and then whenever it was Julius Randle, he was able to
use the post to his advantage. But Luka, he was pinpointing his mismatches, like you said, by using, the pick and roll to manipulate who he was getting on him. Of course, even Spain pick and rolls at times.
Yeah, we saw multiple of those. We'd see,
two defenders shift on him, throughout a little sequence there, throughout stretches in this game. But, that's what I talked about at the top of the podcast when I talked about how meticulously this guy plays basketball. There's not guys who, have such a mental, stronghold in terms of how they operate possession by possession by possession and just don't turn that switch off. He's smart every single play offensively to a degree that's unknown. Even sitting at the nosebleeds, there were a couple passes that he was able to make when the defense would collapse on him inside, might have failed pick and rolls or things of that nature, to where he was able to get it to the corner. And, I kid you not, the defense shifted to the strong side as the ball was in midair. There was a pass to Reggie Bullock. Reggie Bullock ended up missing the three, but the defense shifted to the strong side. And he just foresaw that it was going to happen. It shifted to the strong side as the ball's in midair. We didn't even see it coming.
Yeah.
And then, there was a pass in that first quarter where he was able to pass it to Reggie Bullock and he made a three, where, the defense collapsed on him. Reggie Bullock's man came in, of course, and, just midair. He has the ball and essentially just without looking, chucks it behind him, perfectly on target for Reggie Bullock for a three. Just the offensive intangibles from this guy are otherworldly. Humans shouldn't have a sixth sense in basketball, but this guy does.
Yeah. And
it's truly special to watch. And, just the way he was pinpointing mismatches, I think was what I really wanted to harp on. He was taking advantage in the post game, but he was just getting to the rim at will.
No, it didn't matter. Even if Randall was
whether
on
it be
him.
a floater or a bank shot, he was making everything seemingly. just using his strength. I mean, whoever he got on him, if it was Randall, he'd blow by him a little quicker and then stop, use his body to shield. I mean, I don't talk about enough of just in terms of how he uses his body to shield against defenders. He rarely ever gets blocked. And, you figure a guy like Luka, who, he's athletic, of course, but he's not the, penultimate NBA athlete or anything like that, right? But he's able to just shield off guys. I mean, you almost rarely ever see him get blocked.
He got blocked one time by Mitchell Robinson.
Oh, yeah, by Mitchell Robinson, who really had
like an elite shot player. Yeah.
Outstretch the absolute heck out of his arms to get to it. And I mean, whether it was a smaller guy, he'd post him up and get into the paint. Bigger guy, take him off the dribble, get a floater inside the lane. And I mean, 10 assists, basically all virtue of dribble penetration and kicking out with just some insane jump passes. And he attacked the glass like an absolute monster, led the Mavericks in rebounding with 21 rebounds in a game where it seemed like the Mavericks bigs failed to step up, especially in that first half. We saw Christian Wood and Dwight Powell really get after the glass in that fourth quarter and overtime with Christian Wood. But I mean, admittedly, like they seemed very laxed and, going after some of these rebounds, and Luka stepped up and said, he got onto them a few times. Even you could see him on the court, like he was yelling at them, but he went and took that, for lack of a better term, he went and took that shit for himself, and he got 21 rebounds in this game. And I mean, he was making his step backs too. Yeah. Just the way he was getting into his step backs, they felt so rhythmic and smooth. Sometimes we feel like he's forcing them at times, but in this game, like he, it didn't really matter how outstretched an arm was from a defender or anything like that, so long as he, had his dribble size up and combo down pat and he was ready to shoot it. You could tell, like, when the rhythm's right, that step back's going in. No doubt about it.
Here, I want to see how many 3-pointers he shot, because I'm actually not sure. But
yeah, it felt like a bulk of his points were coming inside.
Yeah, like Luka, he only shot 6 3-pointers.
And I mean, while it's been more, I guess less of a trend this year, when it was warranted and the defense would collapse inside and the perimeter defense for the Knicks was rotating well enough, Luka took advantage of the superstar shot, as I would want to call it. That's the mid-range jump shot, in my opinion. Basically being able to get to a shot wherever you want to at any time, something that's you can contest, but you can't necessarily defend. That's something that only the top players in this game really take. We saw that in overtime with that shot over Julius Randle. We saw it a few times on some like tough floaters, in mid-range shots within regulation.
Yeah.
We really saw the full dynamism of a 3-level scorer who can rebound, monstrously just using his body position. He's, like I said, this goes down to how meticulous he is on, the offensive and defensive glass. He's getting all these rebounds because he's so smart in terms of where the ball is going to come off. And he knows exactly how to use, that 230, 240 pound frame to be able to shield guys off, regardless if they have some height advantage on him. And I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with, in a player unlike I think we've ever seen in NBA history.
Without a doubt. Not even being biased here, I think he might be one of the most talented offensive players in NBA history, if not the most talented offensive player in NBA history.
Yeah.
Just the way that this guy, I think it's fair to say that he's an elite rebounder.
What 3-level scorers are so good at all 3 levels while also being probably the best passer in the league right now?
Nobody. Actually, nobody. I can't.
He's basically like a mix of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Like, is from any sort of descriptor or imagination that you could ever surmise, like that would be basically the only sort of comparison I could.
LeBron James to this last week is like the only comparable guy this season.
Yeah, but the only reason I refrain from the LeBron thing is just because his athleticism transcends Luka's. But that, and I'm not trying to say Luka is the best player. Well, hold back a little bit. I'm not saying he's the GOAT. I'm not saying that he is better all time than Dirk or that he's the best Maverick of all time. But a franchise record, 60 points in this game. We talked about it at the top of the pod, just the records he broke. This is, as Jeff Van Gundy denoted to Dirk in that 2011 playoff series. He said, "This is legendary stuff we're seeing," and it's really, Jalen Brunson didn't even play tonight. It wasn't even the revenge or return game or anything. He had a nice tribute video. Boo-hoo. Let's go. Okay. But for the most part, this is a random December 27th game, a couple days after Christmas. But, I mean, I'd be remiss to say that this is not legendary stuff that we're seeing right now.
Oh, without a doubt. I think this could possibly go down as – well, this has gone down so far as of December 27th as Luka Doncic's greatest game, and maybe even minus like game 2 or game 3, as like one of the greatest games ever played in Dallas Maverick history.
I mean, it's probably a top
5.
It's a top 20-25 game in NBA
history. Yeah,
single game performance.
Yeah, in NBA history, it's probably top 20, top 25. I mean, in the last decade, when was the last time we've seen a performance like this? And oh, by the way, Devin Booker did this, or he scored 70 points, but he lost.
They lost.
Yeah. So.
I'm sorry. We have to always throw a little sunshade in there. I'm trying to look up how many times LeBron has scored 60 because I think it's really just that one time against the Bobcats or the Hornets, whatever it was.
I think it was the Bobcats at the time.
Yeah. LeBron only has one game with 60 plus points. And
it was on the Heat in like 2013.
Yeah, it was against the Bobcats in 2014.
14. Okay.
61.
Yeah.
That wasn't regulation. I will say, admittedly, Lucas did come in overtime, so we have to add
7 points, but still.
Yes.
I mean,
he also had a triple-double on top of it.
He did have a triple-double, yeah. That was the first ever, we mentioned it again, but first ever 6, 20, and 10 triple-double in NBA history.
Now, of course, I mean, we don't know what Wilt was doing back in the day because of some of those.
Yeah, some of the stats, yeah.
But in the modern NBA, it was indeed.
It's the first one. I just think this could have been the greatest game or greatest single feat maybe since Kobe's 80-point game. It could be
season wise because I think playoffs have another tier to them because of the level of intensity in those games and how high stakes they are. I think that playoffs enters another tier when you have like if you was to do this like in the playoffs, that would have a whole nother tier of greatness, of course.
Yeah.
Right? Prior to this, me and Jaren had both agreed that Kawhi Leonard's 45-point game against the Mavericks in Game 6 of the 2021 Western Conference quarterfinals.
That was the greatest performance
individual performance we'd ever seen. And I would say that this was better than that
by far.
If
even that was in the playoffs.
It was in the playoffs.
They were down 3-2.
They were down 3-2. It kept them alive, but it wasn't a closeout game.
No,
it wasn't another round or two. There would be an argument to be made if it was like the Western Conference Finals, but it was the first round of the playoffs, and I mean, just the level of concentration it has, it takes to be able to have this type of game where there's not a dull moment. That is, truly emblematic
in his game
greatness. And I mean, you kind of did you kind of get a sense that he could almost do maybe like average 40 if he played enough minutes every game? If he was just, I'm not saying it would be sustainable by any stretch of the imagination, but Luka played the whole second half. We saw Jason Kidd in peak desperation mode. Obviously this is not something that you want to do.
Long run wise, but
by any means. But we saw, he did not want the Mavericks to have their 3-game win streak snapped by a Brunson and Barrett-less Knicks team that saw, Quentin Grimes carrying the load heavily, and the Mavericks were completely dead in the water. I mean, Jason Kidd was trying anything, and I that's the first time since he's been a coach that I've seen him ride Luka. Maybe I'm sure he's done it in the playoffs, but in a regular season game to ride him the whole
entire fourth quarter,
whole entire second half.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it really was the whole entire second half.
Yeah.
Heck, even to make the adjustment, and granted, it wasn't a great adjustment, but of starting Christian Wood and Dwight Powell. Like, I don't think we've ever seen this done by Jason Kidd.
Yes. I'm not even gonna talk about that adjustment because it wasn't good. It was not good.
That's the first time though that we've seen, and even riding JaVale at the start of overtime. Like, I don't know. I think he's at least opened his head up a little more. So.
Yeah, I will say, like, when JaVale actually had a couple productive minutes at the beginning of overtime, because he was able to just stand pat and hold Robinson down for a few minutes, which bought time for when Powell got back in the game. And I honestly wish they would have kind of kept JaVale in, just in terms of the flow of the game, right? Not saying that JaVale is better than Dwight. I would obviously prefer Dwight in most scenarios, but just based on how the game was going and Robinson's length and, verticality, I kind of wish they would have kept JaVale in, but that's obviously micro critiquing a 60-point triple-double and
9 points in 26.7 second comeback.
I mean, most insane. It's the most points ever scored at the AAC, even by opposing players. Never scored 60.
Hey, was this the best game of the year? Well, no, okay, this wasn't best game of the year. Was this best Mavs game of the year?
This was the best Mavs game of the year. I would title that the podcast, but I think Luka's individual performance deserving.
Well deserving of more.
I'm not going to say that we've harped on him enough, but I just am at a loss of words at this point. I don't really know.
What's amazing is I would feel pretty safe to title this the best Mavericks game of the year. And the fact of the matter is that this didn't even feel like a basketball game or like a good basketball game until probably 30 seconds left in this game.
No, yeah, it's single-handedly the best game of the year purely because of number 77.
Yeah, purely. Without his 60-point, 20 rebound, 10 assists.
No way in hell they win this.
No way. Yeah, no way.
That he, in a game where the Mavericks scored 126 points, he basically accounted for nearly half of the points, just in terms of scoring.
Yeah, scoring. Yeah.
If we're talking about
assisting and
what's the stat called? Points accounted for, whatever it is. I mean, he would account for more than
half. Yeah.
More than half. I mean, that's
what would his
truly unprecedented stuff.
His usage rate be in this game? Probably like
transcendent.
Yeah,
through the roof. I mean, this guy's a transcendent talent. You just don't see this happen.
No, I mean,
the last time that there's even something similar to this was Harden, Houston. I get the whole heliocentrism argument, but heliocentrism or not, you can run the Thunder are fairly heliocentric. I mean, SGA is basically the primary ball handler on that team. I mean, yes, they have guys that can supplement just kind of as the Mavericks do, but I mean, you don't see him doing this.
No, I
mean, he has some insane games. I'm not discrediting him by any means. I'm not trying to make this a comparison by any means. I'm just saying, like, this is an uber talented guy in Luka Doncic here who is in a class by himself in terms of guys that can have a performance like this.
I think
there may be guys, like I said before you go, that may be more deserving of the MVP if you want to make that argument, but you can't argue that he might be the best player in the world, or at least top 3.
No, yeah, that's the thing. I was gonna say he's by far the most offensively gifted player in the NBA by a large margin. I think you can make an argument for Jokic, but I think that argument was pretty much squashed after tonight. But even still,
because Jokic can't. The only reason I don't, I would say that he transcends Jokic, and I was probably even on this position before.
Yeah.
This game is just because Jokic, he can to an extent, but he can't. You can't just give him the ball at the end of the game at the top of the key and be like, all right, go win me this shit.
Yeah, like
Luka, you can't just go boom, 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 boom. Have a ton of size ups between the legs and get to his spot and win the game. I mean, you can, as long as you get him the ball in the right position to start the possession, but you can't just give Jokic the ball at half court and go expect him to dribble into a 30-footer or heave or whatever. He's just not that type of player, which is not an indictment upon him, but I'm not. I mean, the Nuggets are really good, and I think Jokic can be the best player on a championship team. I want to dispel the narrative for any of people.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
who really thinks that,
but I'm just saying they have other guys to supplement because who's going to take the. Jokic may take the last shot in a game so long as they have a play drawn up for him, but just to make things up out of thin air, they're going to go like Jamal Murray, MPJ.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think in terms of that, Luka's by far the most gifted offensive player, and I think NBA history. Like, I mean, James Harden. I think
at his peak,
even still at Luka Doncic right now, which can you make an argument?
I don't know. I mean, Jokic is up there, of course, too.
Yeah, well, Jokic is of course up there.
And you please make sense of our terms here. We are not saying best. We are saying most talented, gifted. I'm not saying that Luka has transcended LeBron or Michael Jordan in terms of his all-time offensive talent, but like just in terms of his God-given abilities and what he's worked for, of course. Well, KD's got to be in that conversation.
Yeah,
too.
I was about to say, like Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I mean, that's a provocative discussion.
We can keep going on and on, but
he's up there. We're not saying he's the best, but he's up there.
Yeah, needless to say, as I was getting back to my point, if Luka isn't top 3 after these 2 50+ performances in 3 games, then or top 3 in MVP discussion, then we're gonna go right.
I mean, because he's been carrying the Mavericks. I mean, I get that there have been some stretches where he hasn't maybe had a 30-point triple double every night, but he's still been a consistent A+ player every single night. And yeah, I just for the most part, and it's very bogus to me that he's not at least in that top 3 threshold.
He's tied for 7th.
Fell off
right now
after tonight. I mean, he did this following a player of the week.
Yeah, following a player of the week. Yeah,
he should win player of the month this month. I don't see why he doesn't. I mean, I'm not going to say enough with Luka, but I just don't know where else to go. We could go for hours talking about him as I've seen here. So, I guess we'll go ahead and deviate to sort of the rest of the game as we've covered Luka ad nauseum here. We won't shed too much of a light on this as like we usually do, but we'll definitely cover it for sure. Who are some other guys that stepped up tonight for the Mavericks, in your opinion? Because guys played really sparingly off the bench. Reggie Bullock played 26 minutes, barring him. We saw 14 minutes from Davis, 6 minutes from McKinley Wright, a little under 3 minutes for JaVale McGee, 6 minutes for Frank, about 5 minutes for Kemba. And that's really it. I mean, it was a very thin rotation tonight, and the starters essentially played a bulk of the minutes for the Mavericks. What did you like and what did you not like from the Mavericks rotation players tonight?
Yeah, so the Mavericks pretty much, I mean, they ran that 5-man starting 5 lineup for probably,
Huge
40 minutes, I would say, or close to. Not close.
All of those guys got 40+ minutes, except for Dwight Powell, who got 30. Just because they went to some single big lineups with Wood at times, so they could kind of intertwine them, but they did play together quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I would say some of the guys that really stuck out to me was I'll go half. First half Christian Wood, second half Christian Wood was.
Let's do guys that stuck out to you for negative reasons.
Oh, negative.
And
okay,
then we'll go positive reasons.
The whole bench. I think they totaled for 9 points this game. Yeah, Reggie Bullock was like 1 of 7 from 3-point line. Let me look that up. I'm pretty 1 of 7.
Yeah, he shot 7 field goals. They were all threes. It was a regression to the Reggie Bullock of November.
Yeah.
I don't know where it came from, but he just could not shoot for the life of him tonight.
At least he made the one important one.
Luka should have had like 17 assists tonight because these were wide open threes. He made the one off the coolest pass that Luka made, so we'll give him that credit. But
I think that was the first one he shot.
I mean, I guess he did, and subsequently we see like when his threes aren't going in, his defense starts to falter at the other end, and he was getting blown by quite a bit by Grimes and McBride, and
even quickly,
even Derrick Rose got by him off a closeout one time. I mean, it was kind of a rough scene for him, but nonetheless, it kind of was what it was. I guess we write this off as a one-off since he's had a good stretch recently, but you would like to get more from him. Kemba, I mean, he just didn't really have like too much of an opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't really see him.
They just didn't run with him much. They played him very sparingly until they went with McKinley Wright, trying to micromanage that knee. More power to them. I mean, he just really didn't do much. He got a little bit of a ball handling opportunity. Had a good attack, and that was really it. Maybe would have liked to see a little more of him, but if they can conserve the knee for when it matters, I'm all here for that. Frank did a good job. He came in and played some solid defense, but
that was about it.
He came off a DHO. Off a curl-off, and he shot a mid-range jump shot that went kind of in and out, but it was a kind of odd game for him. Besides that, he just played some. This is maybe a game where, as good as some of the guys for the Knicks were doing, I would have liked to see a little more Frank just from the defensive aspect.
Yeah.
But he didn't really do much offensively. Davis got fouled on a 3-pointer. He made 2 out of his 3 free throws, and then he made 1 3 in this game. He's going to have his games where he shoots really hard. He'll have his games where he just shoots okay. This one's where he shot okay, but, he was outright horrendous on defense. Yeah. There are some times where he's able to kind of recover a little bit when he gets blown by and is able to kind of strip a guy from behind. But tonight he looked like a lost puppy in like a winter wonderland, essentially. The winter warlock was running after him the whole time because, on the defensive side, that guy was just running around. To
the Knicks' credit, they got the switches that they needed, and pretty much it seemed like it seems like pretty
Randall
much
hunted him a lot. Randall was taking his ass to the basket. It was him and Tim Hardaway Jr. worked to what I call saloon door theater. It was a show of the Wild Wild West tonight. Their asses just went. They just escorted everybody to the bar. Here, come get whiskey for $5. It was
Julius Randle was having a stare down with the basket. So
yes.
it was awful. Dwight Powell, another defensive monstrosity pretty much up until overtime.
Yes. He just couldn't stay with anybody. He was getting lost all the time. And, I talk a lot about Dwight's inability to flip his hips. Anytime he got a small on him, instant blow by. And of course, he had a hard time containing Mitchell Robinson. But while this guy did recover good in the second half, I think that we can't completely expel Christian Wood of blame here because, it's a tough ask, but there were some times where he just kind of really non-effortish under the glass trying to defend Robinson when he got to his spot in the dunker spot. He wasn't even doing a good job trying to front him. You kind of just let him do whatever. We
even saw Jericho Sims do a lot of rebounding.
And he's, I get he has an insane vertical, Jericho Sims that is, but he's the same height as Christian Wood. I at least hope that he's a rookie. Christian Wood could use some of his intangibles, box out a little bit better on him. But he gets a free pass because I felt like he righted himself enough in the second half. To where it was okay. McKinley Wright came in, he handled the ball a little bit, got a nice assist, some nice dribble penetration, but just really didn't play enough. I thought he played really good defense in his 6 minutes though. We already talked about JaVale in overtime. That was basically the whole bench.
It was they pretty much ran with the starters.
Yes.
The whole game.
No, I agree.
Minus the 26 minutes of Reggie Bullock.
Exactly. I want you to kind of detail how Spencer was able to get some of his points tonight because he had 25 in this game, but obviously completely overshadowed by Luka. And, we're not going to obviously talk about Luka at this point because we've already, beat a dead horse with how much we've talked about his 60-point, 21 rebound, 10 assist performance. How was Spencer able to help in this game? Because he wasn't necessarily getting to the rim a whole lot outside of a few possessions in that fourth quarter. I thought really it was his shooting that really carried the loads. He only went 3 for 8 from 3, but went 4 for 4 from the line. What did you like from him tonight?
Yeah, Spencer, I want to say entering that fourth quarter, he had 11 points. Of course, he finished the game with 25. He was able to really pick up the bulk of the offense at times whenever Luka was pretty tired up until late fourth quarter and pretty much the whole entire overtime period. Spencer, he was the guy that was able to, at times, he pretty much forced the Mavericks to kick it into high gear in transition. He got some easy
jettison a lot of transition opportunities. That's a good point. And he was able to get Wood involved in transition a few times. He was doing a really good job pushing the ball. He was getting out running. Tim was able to find him on some outlet passes to where he was able to just pull up for threes or use that ability to get to the rim and penetrate and then find some open threes in transition, to which a lot of Mavericks weren't really knocking down in that first half. But that's really what impressed me the most because, we've seen him, act as that secondary playmaker in the half court, of course, but he'll get out in transition, but he really made it a point to push the tempo tonight.
No, he did. I want to say he had maybe 6 of his points or 4 of his points just off of himself alone pushing the court. Spencer, again,
he got Luka transition.
He did get, and we don't see those a whole lot.
No.
Now Spencer really picked up his shooting in that fourth quarter in overtime. not even overtime, pretty much the whole entire fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And that's where we saw the bulk of Spencer's offense, and it came in, really handy.
And it opened up his drives. I mean, he had probably like 3 or 4 layups solely in that fourth quarter, just based off the, his sheer quickness and single dribble moves and what have you, manipulating the pick and roll. But it was in no small part due to him getting kind of hot from outside and the defense having to respect it. And you could tell like when they started to play up on him, Grimes, he was able to get past him a lot easier than he was at the start of the game.
Had Spencer would have had 30, or if he would have had 30, this probably would have been the first 60-30 game from a duo.
That would
have been pretty cool. But yeah, that's, Spencer, I think he did an amazing job. Again, a quiet 25 points, and that's saying a lot only because Luka had 60, of course. But with that being said, I really liked what Spencer did. Again, pushing the transition. Pretty much a lot of the times that the Mavericks were in transition, it was him handling the ball at those times. Again, as you alluded to, he got Christian Wood involved a lot in that transition offense. And he was really, I think, in terms of just transition offense alone, he was able to pick up a huge load for Luka.
No, 100%. It was quietly like one of his better games of the season, but was going to go completely under the radar for Mavs fans. But so I hope he gets his due credit there. Christian Wood in this game, he had 19 and 9. He had like 14 points midway through the second quarter. He was doing a good job. He was rolling hard to the basket, but Mitchell Robinson and Jericho Sims, they stood pat. I thought that the Mavericks really had a hard time catalyzing pick and roll opportunities for him. There was only maybe, I can count on like one hand times where him or Dwight got like an easy lob. I think one of it, they maybe got one each.
Yeah, one each, yeah.
But yeah, and I mean Dwight only had those 2 points. He was kind of doing a whole lot of nothing on offense. When his rolling becomes redundant and the opposing team centers can drop back, and that really limits him. He shot a corner 3, which was
that was amazing.
That was horrendous.
I think that's the first attempted 3 maybe all year.
Yeah, he used to shoot a little bit.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
back when we were just dead in the water.
Remember that January stretch like a few years ago where he was actually like making 40%?
It's his April stretch.
Oh, it was April. Okay,
yeah,
I thought it was January.
April to White Powell, where he just becomes an all-star before the playoffs. There's games where you start questioning who is this guy. But,
yeah,
he hasn't really tapped into that post AC or post Achilles.
But
anyways, I thought Christian Wood did a really good job of, he made a few threes. The pick and pop really started to get going there because Robinson was obviously hesitant to come out to that 3-point line. So Dinwiddie and Luka did a good job of involving him in that manner. And then he was able to take advantage of some mismatches a few times, get to the rim, get to the foul line a few times. But the Mavericks seemingly just didn't involve him in the offense the second half until overtime, which I thought was very odd. I mean, he ended up finishing with 19 points, but I think the Mavericks maybe could have reduced and alleviated the stress of this game a little bit if they would have involved him more. That would have definitely been more of a critique had we lost this game as to why they just went away from involving him, because he didn't get a lot of touches in that second half. It's not like he was getting doubled. I mean, I understand Luka was, having a lot of self-isolation attempts, but it just seemed as if like he was kind of just be using as this ploy in the paint, kind of rotating from the dunker spot. Sometimes just kind of standing in the corner, essentially acting as a guy in a 5-out offense. Sometimes when in those 2 big lineups where Powell was, he would either, if the Mavericks were playing 5-out with him as the only, sole big, or Powell in the middle and he was still on the wing. It was almost like, the Mavericks were, they were running a lot of like kind of pick and pops with their wings and their guards like Bullock or Dinwiddie, just to try and hunt mismatches for Luka, and to which he would try to, penetrate and then kick. And it just wasn't like a lot of like direct Wood mismatch hunting or isolation attempts for him, or involvement in the pick and roll and pick and pop. For whatever reason, it didn't even seem like the Knicks were doing anything special to stop that. So I think that that's an adjustment that the Mavericks need to start looking at. Like there seems to be stretches throughout parts of this year where we just see Wood become non-involved and a non-factor all of a sudden. But I think that needs to change. Like he has to, I'm not saying being a primary focus, he shouldn't, subject himself to, distract the flow of the offense, but they should make it a point to get him the ball, especially when they're like dead in the water, especially when he hasn't got many touches. And he could definitely provide a little offensive spark. I just don't see why they don't do that more. But, nonetheless, it ended up working out. Lastly, in terms of Mavericks players in this game, let's talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. Went 4 for 15 in this game. Let me see what he shot from three. It was
probably atrocious.
3-11 from three. So this was the, sort of regression Tim Hardaway game after Christmas, where he shot the heck out of the ball. You kind of expected this, that he was getting good looks. Just some. He had a couple dud shots. Jaren is really hard on Tim. I kind of come to expect when Tim's going to have his negative and versus his positive regression games. But, Jaren just can't stand him at times when he takes, either the oh no yes shots or the oh no shots. So what did you think of Tim Hardaway Jr.'s performance tonight? But I will say there have been some stretches where Tim has actually been able to not be any sort of defensive stopgap for this team, but he's been able to hold his own a few times throughout the stretch, particularly when his shooting's going good. Tonight was not an example. He just couldn't stay within. It almost seemed as if Tim did a better job. Like he was making a conscious effort to stay away from people. Whoever his man was, he just said, screw it. I don't want to close that. I seen a meme getting passed around on NBA Instagram recently. It's like when Tim was playing for the Knicks, there was a transition 3 opportunity and a ref ended up sliding down the court. And he just calls him safe. He doesn't even try to get contest a shot when he was in a good position to do so. Defense is just not the man's calling card, but couple that with a bad shooting night. Tim had a couple weird attacks where he basically had 2 guys contest on him in the paint and he just shot it anyways and missed. So it was a bad Tim Hardaway Jr. game, but I would harp on it a lot more, but on a night like this, I
guess I'll harp on him a little more. Defensively, Tim Hardaway, I know there was a point, I want to say it was Miles McBride. Basically all he had to do, Miles McBride was on the opposite corner 3 and he drove through the painted area. And I don't know what Tim Hardaway was doing, but he just stopped in the paint and was just looking at the basket pretty much after a shot went up. And I think Mitchell Robinson got a rebound and Miles McBride is wide open behind him. And it was an easy mid-range shot. That's just really indicative of what Tim Hardaway's defense was tonight. But nonetheless, Tim Hardaway, he took some really bad threes. I know, sometimes his shots just not falling. He was taking some good ones to his credit. And Tim Hardaway, I think, is probably the biggest player in the NBA where if you really look at his jump shot, you could tell if it's going in or not.
Yeah, and just in terms of how he speaks.
And that's really what I was looking at tonight. The shots that did fall, they looked really clean. And the shots I guess most of the shots that didn't fall, it was just, he rushed, honestly. And that's kind of what his problem has been, at least early on in the season, when he was just rushing too many shots. But tonight, definitely more of a negative regression game in terms of what he shot towards Christmas. But with that being said, hopefully he can pick it up. He scored 32 points against Houston last time. And I want to say we play Houston again. So it'll be the total Tim Hardaway game coming up against a bad team where, maybe Luka doesn't play. So we'll see what happens. But I think there's definitely, whenever Tim's shot is falling, his defense correlates, and this was not the case tonight. So
no, 100%. Now that we covered everybody, I guess we'll go kind of some sort of team narratives and how the Mavericks, fended against the Knicks and what the Knicks were able to do tonight that really put pressure on the Mavericks. The Knicks really didn't have anybody that really made a huge impact off the bench. D Rose and Hartenstein kind of played sparingly, provided a little bit of a spark, but each of them wasn't too heavily involved in the rotation. Jericho Sims in 13 minutes came and got 8 rebounds. Like you said, he was doing a really good job fortifying the paint. But outside of that, he only had really 1 dunk. Miles McBride had 14 points. He went 1 for 9 from 3 and 4 for 14 from the field. So he had a really rough shooting night. But just how stylistically he plays, he's this. He's just a perfect off-ball guard.
Yeah.
Who also can guard 1 through 3 at the end of the other end. Despite only being 6'2". Really like his game. He has a little bit of everything. He's not he's not this, like distinguished secondary playmaker, but he has some playmaking elements and shot creation elements to his game. Also kind of a spot up shooter, also a good defender, also a guy who, is going to just intangibles wise, is going to attack the glass, do all the dirty work, things like that. I really like his game. He had a rougher shooting night. And I know Knicks fans have kind of harped on him in terms of his effectiveness this year, but he did good off the bench for the Knicks. I thought he actually applied pressure on the Mavericks tonight at times. Hit a few mid-range shots. We already talked about RJ Barrett. That's a reason like why Miles McBride played so much in this game. Because RJ Barrett went out early with that right index finger laceration. But Julius Randle, per usual, comes in and absolutely destroys the Mavericks. We already talked about how they were able to mismatch hunt, and those were the possessions that I was getting pissed off about, where the Mavericks seemingly just had no help defense. We're just segueing Julius Randle to the rim when Tim Davis would get switched on to him. Julius Randle went 11 for 23 in this game, so almost 50%. He had 18 rebounds. Mitchell Robinson. I didn't either. Yeah. Mitchell Robinson had 16. So the Mavericks got out-rebounded 55-47. Not as bad as you'd think, but in no small part just due to Luka, essentially, because our bigs were almost non-existent on the class tonight in terms of Powell and Wood. And, Wood definitely more so in the fourth and overtime was able to represent himself a little bit, but nonetheless, they were non-existent to an extent. But, besides Julius Randle getting to the line and getting escorted to the rim by some of our defenders, he did make some really tough threes in this game, and he always kind of shows out against the Mavericks. So props to him from that aspect. Like the Knicks the Knicks did have like some bad luck in terms of Brunson and Barrett being out. They did bear, some games for some guys that we wouldn't usually see. Yeah. Mitchell Robinson just basically off staying in the dunker spot and getting offensive rebounds was able to apply pressure on the rim at 20 points. His career high is 23. Mm-hmm. And he did a phenomenal job offensively tonight. He could have made a couple more free throws, of course, because he's a really low, but that's not what he does. He played his role to an absolute premium. This is probably the best game I'd seen him play like live. Yeah, in a game that I'd watched, like offensively, I'd never seen him have that much effectiveness. And albeit it's with a very convoluted Mavericks big man rotation that's missing. They're basically only rim protector and Maxi Kleber, who's not even best suited as a primary integral rim protector. But props to him for taking advantage for what the defense gave him is what I can tell you, because he just kind of stood pat and did what he needed to do. And he looked like a dominant force inside. Luckily we were able to remediate it because we have a guy on the other side who scored 60 points. Yeah. Emmanuel quickly, like I said, he played 50 minutes in this game. I think the most minutes out of anybody on both sides of the ball. In an absence of Brunson, this guy did a great job applying pressure on the rim. He had a really rough shooting game. He went 5 for 21 from the field. Wow, actually. Yes. Yeah, I knew he was clanking a lot.
I didn't realize he was shooting that much.
And he went, I want to say, he went 1 for 10 from 3. Only made that one like in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, fourth quarter, yeah.
So he's not going to shoot that bad. Like the Maverick, like I was trying to tell you, like the Mavericks played so bad defensively to where they shouldn't have won this game, but they still did because the Knicks bared some negative regression in terms of guys shooting bad and Quickly and McBride. But this guy, Emmanuel Quickly played. He did a great job putting pressure on the rim nonetheless, despite a bad shooting game. I know this is a guy who's been tossed around some trade talks to the Mavericks. I'd love to have him here personally. I don't know how feasible it is, but it showed me, he definitely showed me some of his intangibles as a player tonight, having 15 assists, being able to be the primary point of attack ball handler, being able to run the offense, really not having a ton of turnovers, getting guys in the ball in spots where like they need to be. And he didn't do so in like a forceful manner. It wasn't like flashy or anything, but he was running the offense to a T despite him having a bad shooting game. And he didn't let it bog him down. No, not at all. It was impressive. Like he looked good out there. You could yes, he was missing a lot of shots, but it wasn't like you were watching him and he's like, oh, this guy sucks.
No, for a young player who, I would say is pretty volatile on his shooting. Yeah. To see
very up and down.
Yeah. To see him, have a really, really bad shooting game. And he seemingly just put it behind him, and he was giving guys the ball that could score. And that was Julius Randle. That was Mitchell Robinson. And that was Quentin Grimes. I do want to get in him.
Yeah,
but
he's the last guy to get into.
That's, I think that speaks maturity of his game. Again, you mentioned trade talks. I would love to have him here in Dallas, but how real is that? I don't know. But yeah, I think, for how bad he shot, I think he had a really, really good game.
Yes, me too. Double, 13 points, 15 assists. Lastly, we'll get into Quentin Grimes, who had 33 points, and he ended up going, can you check his, I had him having to close the NBA app. Quentin Grimes went on his threes in this game. He ended up shooting 7 for 16 on threes. I mean, he was shooting the lights out during stretches.
He was like
game.
7 of 8 at one point.
Yeah. And he went 12 for 25 from the field. This guy is Josh Green minus, I guess, like a little bit of the athleticism Josh has.
Yeah.
And like the passing ability, but he still has the ability to attack off of a closeout or, furbish some of his own offense. He's so quick off some of these single dribble moves, get to the rim, apply pressure there in tandem with just insane 3-point shooting, just bolster 3-point shooting. And he's a really damn good defender.
Really good.
I mean, I know Luka had 60 tonight, but you got to realize that outside of Grimes and Robinson, this Knicks lineup is very, scarce in terms of their defensive pressure they can apply. That's not discrediting Luka's 60 points by any means, but I mean, he did when he was matched up one-on-one with Luka, which, throughout decent stretches in this game, he did a good job contesting. Luka just was able to finish over.
No, Luka just Luka.
But I mean, what a game by him. I mean, the Knicks were finding him positions to where he was, hitting every three. I mean, this guy is going to be one of the, premier 3-and-D, pseudo creators in our game going forward. And I think NBA fans definitely need to keep him on their radar. I mean, he's only, I guess he's only 22 years old.
Wow.
I didn't even know he's that young. I mean, this guy's
he's in his second year. I do know that.
Yeah. I mean, just all I'm going to say is he's the first pick of the 25th pick of the 2021 draft. This guy's a steal. I mean, he's a lottery talent.
Huge steal. And he is quickly emerged as one of the more
he was good
starters.
last year, but he was still in that sort of echelon where we could include him in a Donovan Mitchell trade. If I'm the Knicks, with all their capital and their ability to make a move at some point, I'd be hesitant to include this guy in a trade.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, he's such a young piece that you can, I don't want to say build around, but he's a guy that you get a star and you put them around. And
he can be the third, fourth best player
on
one day on a championship team.
Yeah.
Obviously the consistency isn't there, but I mean, I'm very high on this guy.
Yeah.
But it was quite the revelation. I really enjoyed watching him, seeing his game, because I haven't watched a ton of him.
No, yeah.
Admittedly, outside of that one Mavericks versus Knicks game, me and Jaren, of course, try to keep up with outside NBA stuff as much as we can. We do, as good of a job watching other stuff. But we don't have a lot of opportunity to consume whole games of other teams.
Yeah, whole games. Yeah,
we do consume a lot of content and media of basketball figureheads showing us other players, and that's primarily where we get our info from. Pretty sourced individuals, but we don't have a lot of opportunities to consume whole games. And sometimes you can only get the intangibles and the play style of a guy when you see a whole game.
Mm-hmm. And that's Quentin Grimes. I early on in the season, I know he was inserted in that starting lineup, and they just haven't been able to take him out since.
No.
This is a guy.
This is what we hope Josh Green becomes.
Yeah,
but in a different, with a slightly, different stylistic tone to it. Of course, a little more passing, maybe a little less shooting, but still that, creation, attacking ability, things of that nature, the defensive intangibles, that's kind of what you're looking for. I remember when we did the first Mavs versus Knicks podcast, Bibbs did the Spider-Man meme where they were pointing at each other, the two Spider-Mans.
Yeah.
Kind of the same. So I thought that was kind of funny on Twitter. Shout out to Bibbs. But nonetheless, I mean, I don't really know how much more we can really pull away from this game. We could talk about Luka for 8 hours if we wanted to, but do you have any more lasting words for our Lord and Savior before we end the podcast, Jaren?
Thank you so much, Luka. We do not deserve you.
This is the reason we do this, guys.
We were dead in the water, sitting in our seats on our phones in the middle of the game, and
We were glancing at our
We were
phones.
glancing.
We are always paying attention, guys. Come on. We're the Mainstream Mavs podcast.
Yeah, come on. But yeah, this one was I'm just like amazed that we were there.
Yeah. I don't think I've really had any like coming to God moments since I started this podcast, but like a night like this, there have been times where our motivation has lacked.
Yeah.
Where we just haven't really felt it. And this was like, damn, like this is why I do this.
Yeah, no, this reason.
This is why I am passionate about basketball, like getting to cover something as special and momentous as that. Seeing the beauty and the art behind the sport. It was that full display tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Once we get the media day necklaces around our necks and we get to wear that for 41 games out of the year, I hope to see more things like that. But in our
wherever we're working,
or wherever we're working. Shout out to Washington. I'm just kidding. This was, as you alluded to, single-handedly like the best experience and single player performance maybe.
It made me want to work harder.
Yeah, maybe. It did make me want to work harder. But just Luka is well deserving of that beer. So I hope he had plenty more beers as well.
Yes, as will we tonight.
Yeah, as will we.
I'm just joking. We're under 20.
Yeah, we are underage. We do not drink at all.
At all. Never.
Never.
Do you even know what alcohol tastes like?
I don't know what alcohol tastes like.
We'll find out one day. But not tonight. Nonetheless, guys, we will catch you in the next one. Make sure to subscribe and like and comment on our YouTube. If you guys are watching on that medium, it is Mainstream Mavs Podcast. Of course, you know that if you're watching. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, make sure to subscribe to us and give us a 5-star rating. And if you can give us a review at all, do that if you feel so inclined. Thank you so much for listening this far in the podcast. We appreciate all your support, and we appreciate Luka for what he has gave to us tonight. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at mainstream_Mavs. We posted a bunch of stuff during the game there. Got a picture of Dirk's statue. It was really cool. So we will catch you guys in the next one. Jaren, you always got the next game coming up for us. Who are we playing tomorrow?
It's not tomorrow. Or I guess by the time this podcast comes, it will be tomorrow.
It will be tomorrow.
So we play the Houston Rockets at 6 on Valley Sports. Yeah, Valley Sports Southwest.
Valley Sports Southwest, Houston Rockets at 6. We will catch you guys in the next one. What an occasion. Luka Doncic, 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists.
2 steals and a block.
Game of the year, overtime, game time, or fourth quarter, game tying basket to send it to overtime off of his own missed free throw. Insanity.
But
not Linsanity. Luka sanity. We will catch you guys in the next one.
Bye.